Welcome to the Worth Listening podcast, where we focus on having positive and productive conversations about money. Join your host, Lauren Williams, four-time Olympian turned financial planner, as her guests share their stories about how they manage money. We aim to help you own your personal money story and feel good talking about it. Lauren will teach you that money is a tool that can help you live the life you want. You should feel comfortable listening, sharing, and communicating about it. And now, here's your host, Lauren Williams.
Hello, and welcome to the Worth Listening podcast. I'm your host, Lauren, and today I'm excited to have former NFL cornerback Kelly Jennings sharing his money story. There's this saying, brother from another mother. You may have heard it before. Well, when it comes to KJ and I like to call him my twin brother from another mother because it's so true for him and I. We were both finance majors at the University of Miami. Then we went on to play our respective professional sports. And when we reconnected years later, we found out that both of us were on the path to CFP certification because we wanted to help people organize their finances. When I tell you we're like twins, I completely mean it. Kelly and I discussed today his frugal financial start, and he even shares how he made $1,000 last for 3 years during college. KJ shares how he handled the difficult situation of cutting off a good friend from personal loans. Then we chat a little bit about him pursuing his passion after 6 seasons in the NFL. Let's listen as Kelly Jennings shares his money memoir. Kelly, it's so good to have you on the show. I am super excited to chat with you today.
I'm glad to be here, Lauren. Good to talk with you again as well.
Yes. So let's just start at the beginning, not the way beginning. I don't want to know how you were born, but let's start way back in your childhood. Tell us about your first memory of money, kind of where you grew up, and what was the first memories that you had of money?
Well, I grew up in Live Oak, Florida, the small town in northern Florida. And as you asked me about money, when I first realized, I remember as a kid, my mother being the treasurer at church and having to come home and count the money and allow me to count with her. So I think I started learning about money through that process. And as I got older, I started to realize and saw the difference between my mother and my father. Where my mother was more a free-spirited person who spent on any and everything anybody asked. She was, loaning or doing what she could to help. Now, my dad on it is the complete opposite, where I think he still has the first penny that he's ever made. And it was one of those things too. Even when time for like school time, school clothes, I would have to go ask my dad, and that was kind of like pulling teeth because he was grumbling about you always need money and blah blah blah. And so I think I grew to learn that money was one of those things where you had to kind of hold on to because I feared my dad in some ways through that stuff. And so that was kind of my early contrast of the different forms of how we can use money or how we get with trying to manage our money.
Who would you say you're more like, your mother or your father?
I think I've taken on a lot of qualities of my father that I will say this, though, I am warring against and trying to get out of that mode. And I think more of my coming to know Christ and kind of learning money through that has helped me to have more of an open hand and to trust him and his provisions and my spending and all those things. So I lean toward my father, but I'm trying to become more open-handed. So to be a mixture of my mother and father.
Yeah, that's interesting because our parents play such a large role in developing our money behavior. So did you have any siblings?
I did. 2 brothers, 1 sister. But my situation is unique in that my oldest brother is 19 years older than me. And then a brother after him is 17 years older than me. And my sister's 16. So they were all basically, one was out of the home and the other 2 was getting ready to graduate high school when I was born. So I grew up with them being more like my mother and father's more than a brother-sister relationship.
That is really interesting. Sometimes it's like being the first child, you have certain responsibilities, or as the last child, they say you get to have it all, but you guys were so far away. You were kind of like the only child.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, I was kind of like the only child. And my siblings would joke that I got all the perks and maybe not as many spankings and things that they got growing up. So we do still we still joke about that with me being the baby so far removed.
Yeah. So did you have like an allowance or piggy bank? There are other things in your childhood that you remember like that?
I did have a piggy bank. My parents had this huge pig that was always sitting on the floor. It was a glass pig, and they had a whole bunch of coins in it. So as I was growing up, I took a little spot in my dresser, and I would always put my money there. And because I said a lot of my father was in me, so when I got money during Christmas and all these things, I had my little spot that I would put my money into. And then once I hit high school, my dad, as strict as he was with money, I think he learned through some guys at work about giving an allowance. So he started giving me $20 a week for just whatever. And so I would use that for school, but try to save as much as I possibly could so I would have some left over later.
So you're definitely your father's ingrained in you, and the savings was a good habit that you had from early on.
Oh, I'm very early on. I even remember I got a scholarship when I went to college from his work for $1,000, and that $1,000 lasted me about, I want to say, if I'm not mistaken, about 3 years before I had it all spent up. So I was really conscious on trying to make a dollar stretch.
I have never seen a dollar stretch that far. $1,000 made it over a period of 3 years. I'm sure it had to be a little supplement happening there somewhere.
Well, well, yeah, we did have our supplement from our stipend that we got from playing sports in college. But that money, I tried in whatever ways to use my cane card that we had through college, and if I didn't need it, or if I could actually even get my mother to get me some clothes or something like that through something else, I would do that versus spending my own money.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about your college experience. So you went to the University of Miami, the U.
That's right.
What was set up for college? If football wasn't an option, did you still have goals and dreams of going to college and money set aside for that, or?
So I answer the first question on kind of goals and aspirations, where, believe it or not, my goal was not to play football. It was just one of those things that as a sophomore, junior in high school, the talent, some coaches and stuff saw the talent there. Was like, man, you could possibly go and play college football. So that came along later, but my mother growing up, it was always school, 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 education. Make sure you get education. She always had this saying that you get God in your heart and the schooling in your brain, no one can ever take it away from you. And so that was what I kind of grew up with. And so I thought I would go to college to be a computer science major because that's what my brother did, and he was making decent money. So I figured I would go and do that. And it was one of those things too. I was playing, but I was doing my school. And my junior year, go up into my sophomore, going into my junior year, people were like, well, you may possibly be able to go and play professionally as well. So it was almost kind of like icing on the cake. But I knew I was going to get my education because my mother was not going to let me not get that.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about your brother. You said he was a computer science major, and just like the example that your siblings set for you. And like you said, you saw the way he was living, and you said, oh, he must make a good living. And can you kind of expand upon what you saw and what you felt that made you want to do that? Because I happen to know that you didn't end up being a computer science major. So what led you to your other major as well?
Well, seeing him, like I said, he lived on his own. He had his own car. He had a house. Anytime we went somewhere or need to go somewhere, he was there. He was, able to buy me stuff as well. And I'm like, well, he seems to be doing well, being a computer science major. Plus, I like computers. But I got to college. I had a CIS. I think it was like CIS 101, Computer Information Systems. And I was spending a lot of time in the computer lab while also trying to practice and play and not doing so well in my computer projects. And it hit me real quick that this may not be the profession for me. So I took a step back, and so I just kind of had to do some self evaluation. I was like, what do I like? And that picture of me with my mother and counting money came to my mind. I've always liked math. And so I went to academic advisors and just talked with Carol Walker, if you remember her, about it. And finance was something that came up. It involved numbers. I didn't have to do any English. So I was like, I'll be a finance major.
Ha! It's funny how we get led different directions. So I have a similar story in that people ask, how did I pick my major? And I'm like, oh, I like math and I like money. And so they said, oh, well, finance is good for you.
Yeah.
Cool. So what did you plan on doing with your degree afterward if football hadn't been an option?
I figured I was going to be in some form of banking or private banking. Even my summer in 2005, my last season going into Miami, before that last season came about, I actually did an internship for Bank of America. working in the private investing wing. And so I figured I would either do something like that or work in a bank and become maybe like a bank president or something along those lines. And that was kind of my goal or my dream if I didn't play football.
I love the way you said, and be the president of the bank. You weren't talking about like, I'm just going to go work at a bank. You said, I think I'll go be the president of a bank eventually. Like you already were setting goals.
Yeah, I mean, because I couldn't stand and be a teller all your days. But like I said, I remember my brother making decent money, and I assume a teller does well. But if I'm me, and I guess this is something else I steal from my father as well. He worked the same job for about 35 years. And I figured if I'm in a bank and I'm going to work and stay at a specific bank that I can work my way, I would work my way or seek to work my way up the ladder. So that was kind of how I was going to goal set to just possibly be a bank president.
I like it. I like it. However, you were a finance major, but your road took a different path. So tell us a little bit about how the NFL came about and what that process was like, being drafted to go pro and kind of what happens there.
Like I said, I thought I was going to be maybe a banker or something like that. And kind of same similar situation to high school. I get to my junior year, and like even if you're up at the junior year, you may be like a fifth round pick or something like that. And so of course I was like, I'm definitely coming back for my senior year. And came back. I had the best year of my college career. And I get to the end of the year, agent comes along like, hey, you could possibly be a second round draft pick and all these things. I was like, okay, cool. Let's go. Let's see what happens. And I was blessed enough to actually be drafted in the first round to the Seattle Seahawks. I had a small gathering with my family in Orlando at my brother's house, the one that I mentioned that's a computer science major. I had all my siblings and immediate family there. I didn't want to have anything too big just in case I didn't get drafted because I knew a friend that happened to and didn't want to be embarrassed in that way. So we had a small gathering. Long story short, Seattle called me. I was drafted, pick 31, went off to Seattle and where I became a professional athlete and started the whole football career.
That is amazing. I want to pause a little bit and talk about what the process works like from the moment you get drafted until you get to camp. I know sometimes you talk to someone on the telephone and then you have to fly out the next day. Can you talk us a little bit through the process and who pays for that flight or where's the inner workings of how that all plays out?
Yes, you are exactly right. It's a whirlwind. I think it was a Saturday. I got a call from the Seattle Seahawks. I'm on the phone. They announce it on television. I'm celebrating. They basically say, hey, can you step outside away from all the screaming? I step outside. They're like, you need to step outside because we need to book your flight because you need to leave in the morning so you can come to a press conference tomorrow morning. And I'm in Orlando, Florida. They're talking about going to Seattle. So they basically put me on the phone with the booking travel agent who booked a flight for me to leave at I think it was like 6 o'clock or 5:30 that morning to basically fly out to Seattle for a interview or a television interview that afternoon. So basically celebrate my family that night, leave them there in Orlando and fly out to Seattle, go for an interview. I think I stayed one other day, if I'm not mistaken, to do some other things. And then I turn right around and fly back to Orlando and then continue doing some training, some working out. And then they had what's called a mini camp that I had to turn right around like 2 weeks later, fly out for a mini camp. That was about 3, 4 days long, fly back. And so I accumulated a whole bunch of frequent flyer miles real quick. And that's kind of just that process. It's a whirlwind. Whenever they have something scheduled or whatever, now basically, I won't say they own you, but you're an employee. So whatever they ask you to do, you have to do it. It's just a quick turnaround that way.
You said they paid for the initial flight out there. And after that point, does it kind of like fall on you? I want to talk a little bit about the expenses related to the process of going pro and even just a little bit before that, because, you get out of school and there's a period of time from you're done with your college career to when the draft happens and where you have to go train or where you decide to go to train and the costs associated with that and the agent and putting your team in place. So did a financial advisor approach you in addition to an agent and other people that approached you during this time?
Yes, I also had a financial advisor approach me. I'll back up a bit and just when I was preparing for the draft, my agent basically set me up. I could have gone to a facility, but we had a great strength coach there at University of Miami, Andrew Swayze. So I wanted to stay there. So he got me an apartment there, also got me on a meal plan, and my agent paid for all of that stuff. And what I did actually, I went to my father and I took out a loan from him. I could have gotten it from my agent, But I was like, you know what? If I'm going to pay somebody back in interest, let it be my father. So I went and borrowed the money from him. I think it was like $10,000 for basically 2 months of training and all those things that I had to prepare for the upcoming draft. So I spent my time doing that. I got the money from him. The agent paid for basically all my working out, anything that was related to my eating, sleeping, and working out. And then any leisurely stuff that I did, I paid for myself. And then basically you get drafted, and all that traveling back and forth to the mini camps that I mentioned, that is paid for by the teams. So the teams get you to and from facilities and workout and trainings when you have to do that. Now, once you're actually there and you set your location and you're part of the team, any traveling after that is on you. Because if you're just like, okay, I want to go home, well, you're going to pay to go home and you're paying to come back. It's just when you're being drafted and they're doing all those things, you're doing that all. I mean, they're doing that for you. But once you're signed on the team, part of mini training camp and all that stuff, all the travel is on you then after.
Oh, that's perfect. Thanks for kind of really breaking that down for us. And I think it's really cool that you had the foresight to think about it for a minute and say, okay, I have these costs coming up. I know I can't afford to fill this gap and I need to be at my tip top shape, and to be able to go to your dad and ask for that money as opposed to going to someone else who, may or may not charge a higher interest rate or not sure exactly how it works, et cetera. I think that's pretty neat.
Yeah. I'll say one mistake I made, now looking back hindsight, that I forgot to mention. I also bought a car. I didn't have the money, as you can tell, but I knew I was going to get it after the draft. And so my agent actually gave me the money for the car payment, and I had to pay him back later. Hindsight, I wish I would have waited until I actually had my money, knew how much I had a plan of what I wanted to do with it, and then made that decision versus just being kind of excited and wanting that new flashy car and going ahead and pulling the trigger, now owing someone else versus being able to have my own plan and doing it in my own way. That makes sense.
No, yeah, that completely makes sense. So what was that like then? You said like the first big check came in, and what were you thinking? Probably more money maybe than you had ever seen, or?
Man, I almost lost my mind. I basically went from making like a stipend check because I was living off campus was like $1,200 maybe or something like that a month to, if I'm not mistaken, my signing bonus for that was like 750,000. And so I get to training camp, I sign my name on a paper, and then all of a sudden, like the next day, I have $750,000 in my bank account. You talk about lose your mind. I could only think I could count that high at the point. So seeing that in there was emotionally, I remember kind of going through like, I only knew how to deal with, like I said, something like $10,000 or less. But to have that amount and knowing how long it'll last or where to put it, move back up on that too. Again, I spoke about my financial advisor. I did have one, and he was helping me, and that money was in an account that he was helping manage and put all those things in place. But at the same time, this is one thing that always stuck out to me. I asked for a budget because I didn't know how to spend it, and his words to me were, "I could put you on a budget, or I could give you a budget, but no one ever sticks to it. So
Oh my.
basically, I'm not going to do it." Yeah, and so me not knowing anything, I said, okay, and just proceeded to use what I knew to make that money function. Going back, rewinding, that was a bigger mistake than I would say even buying the car because I was just now spending at my own will versus having a plan dictating and helping me move through having all of this money all at once.
Let's talk a little bit about the process for finding a financial advisor. Like you said, this process happens. What does that look like? Is it similar to the agent process where there's advisors everywhere that are reaching out to you? Or how did you find the gentleman that you started working with initially?
I'm not sure how it is today, but when it was my time, like where I was living, I was getting stuff in the mail from advisors. I had advisors calling me. People had my number. All of a sudden, wanting to know about my family and all this stuff. I'm like, who are these people? And so in that process, they all sent me material and all that stuff. And I went to my brother, the one who lived in Orlando, and asked if he would help me in that process of finding an agent and a financial advisor. And so he looked through all the stuff with me. We interviewed a few guys, and ultimately we ended up going with the one that we were. And so they do pursue you. Financial advisors will pursue you similarly, the same way that agents do, but the process, because of the nature of the business, is just a little bit different.
Gotcha. All right, let's talk a little bit about how money works in your profession. There's frequently stereotypes of how it works in the NFL and the ways that NFL players spend their money or extravagant bills and things like that. Sometimes you hear about like rookie life and the team will take you out to expensive dinner and run out and leave you with the bill. Did you have any experiences like that?
I sure did. My third biggest regret. So, in order, not having a budget is number one. Number two is buying a car before I actually had the money. And number three is my rookie night, where, of course, I was a first round draft pick and I was a rookie. And I guess I was not brave enough to just say, look, guys, here's what I'm willing to do and here's what I'm willing to not do, or whatever else. And so, because I didn't do that, long story short, I ended up spending roughly $19,000 in one night. And it's one of those memories where I kick myself as much as I think about it, because that had to be the most ignorant thing that I could ever done. And from what I understand, that still continues today. And that's something, to be honest, I hope changes, because we all know as players how hard it is to get to where you are, to get that money. We also know how easy that money is to leave the hands of those who come into it. And so I would hope that they would set up an environment that teaches more conserving that than, oh yeah, let's just go be fearless and spend whatever you want to. Because what that also teaches, I think, is, oh man, you know what? I can go spend as much money as I want, and it's gonna always be here. I can spend $19,000 a night and still have a whole bunch of money. That it will only last for so long. And so I hope that environment has changed a bit to kind of help conserve and teach guys a different way.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the culture of the team that you were on and the things that you saw while you were in the league. That was one experience that you had, but was there ever like locker room talk about organized finances, or was there a couple of veteran players on the team that said, hey, put your money aside, or you guys have multiple retirement plans in the NFL? I know they have a rookie symposium, but what was the culture like in talking about being responsible with your money? Was there anybody that was talking about that?
You know what? There are a few guys, and that's one thing I want to mention as well. Of course, you hear the broke and all those things, and that's painting with a broad brush. Yeah, there's a few that happens to, but on the other side of the spectrum, there are guys who are very conservative and who try to beat the drum on the other end of conserving their money. I never forget, there were two guys. One was another defensive back, and another was a defensive lineman. And they were on that beating the other drum. Hey, conserving the money, stay out of debt. Don't do this, don't do that. And as a rookie, I'm hearing that, but I'm hearing more people on the other side of spending. And as the light went off in my brain, and I actually started listening to them and started handling my money in that way. And that's when I really started getting a firm grasp, and I guess would say laying a foundation on who I am today financially and how I handle my money. It actually took me back to my roots of my father being a conservative and pinching pennies, and that mindset will, because you get the math saying, yeah, you can spend, spend, spend. I thank God that I actually listened to the conservative bunch that was saying, hey, do these things, be out of debt, have a plan. I remember talking to my defensive back, one of my friends, saying, hey, you know what, I have a budget now. And he was like, man, you see how it helps to manage your life versus you managing it, which, as our emotions know, will run amok and do anything, but you have actually something that we put in place that'll help you manage your money. So I say all that to say there are other sides of the spectrum of that, of guys who really try to do it well. And it depends on who you are and who you start to listen to. And so if there's anybody listening to me right now, I would say listen to the more conservative guys.
Right. I love that you talked about, like you said, that $19,000 night that years later you still cringe when you think about, but it was one mistake, one $19,000 night that didn't break you.
Correct.
If you had continued, like you said, to listen to the crowd and go the wrong way, you could have had many $19,000 nights and headed down a different road.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that sometimes is lost on people is you can make one mistake and it doesn't feel good to make that mistake. And if it's an expensive enough mistake, you'll remember it for a while. But one mistake doesn't break you. It can put you back on the right path to correct yourself. And you're never at the bottom. You can always turn around from where you are once you've made a mistake, learn from it and move forward.
That's right. I will say that's where I am. I definitely did learn from it. I thank God for those guys on the team who were conservative. And I actually went to a conference where it's called Professional Athletes Outreach. And the advisor there was just talking kind of along the same lines about being out of debt, about learning from your mistakes. And for some reason, the light bulb went off. That specific day, I went and paid off my credit card, and I've not been in debt since then, and have worked to use my money in a different way. But like you just said, a lot of that came from humbling myself and learning from the mistakes that I had made along the way.
For sure. Let's talk a little bit about the cost of being an athlete and the expenses that you incur as part of your job, because people sometimes focus on the large earnings of an NFL player, but there's also some cost to be able to play at the level that you play that, kind of come with the territory. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'll start with physical costs. Like now, my left knee is not how it should be. My neck is a little out of whack, and I have lower back problems. There's a physical cost that comes with pushing your body to the level that we push our bodies to. And then also just thinking from a monetary standpoint, there's massage and stretching and nutrition and all these things that you have to kind of put your time and effort into. Now, you don't have to, but I think the good athletes actually use those because as your body being kind of your ticket or your money tool, we have to take care of that. And that's, as you know, to stay at a high level is not cheap as well. And then just like anybody else, you have the normal daily costs of electricity, light, water bills, and generally, if you're an athlete, you're buying a bigger house because you have more money, so that's more money coming out. And that's one of the biggest things I've learned as well is cash flow. Learning what's going out, what's coming in, and seeking to have what's coming in above what's going out. Because the minute that reverses, now I'm on headed down the wrong path. So for anybody again who may be listening, getting a grasp of your actual cash flow can take you a long way as well.
For sure, for sure. Let's talk a little bit about family and how you handled, like you said, traveling to games and going around and those different sorts of things. So can you tell us a little bit about, you hear sometimes, like you said, the stereotype is you got to fly in 40 people every weekend and have a great time with all, and that's all on your tab. Did you have any, situations like that where you had to get family under control, or did you set up a plan of some sort in order to be able to make sure that was part of your cash flow, that the people are around to support you, but not also taking away from?
You know what? I will have to thank God in this respect where I did, as far as flying people in and doing all that, I never did. Let's say if I was playing in Tampa, because my family, my parents are older, that's why my siblings were older, so they never flew. I don't think they've never flown a plane. So if I played like in Tampa or something like that, they would drive and I would pay for the tickets to get them there, but never for hotel costs or any of those things. So I didn't have that experience that a lot of guys do have. But I would, like I said, if I needed multiple tickets for something like that, I would go about doing it that way. Now, on the other side of that, I had friends who, and one of my good friends in particular, who would ask me for money on a regular, which growing up, that was one of the things. We were boys, I needed money, he gave me some, he needed some. So, I already had that emotional tie, like, okay, if he asked, that's my boy, I'm going to give him some money. And so I was, giving him money on a regular. And then I hear from another friend that, hey, what he's telling you he's using that money for, he's not using it for. I actually found out he was actually using the money to go and gamble with. And I finally got to a point, and as hard as it was to step back to him and say, I can't help you anymore. It's one of those things where it was hard at the time, but later on he came back and thanked me for it because he was like, you know what, you were actually enabling me. And when you started saying no, I had to go and get a job. And now he's working for Sherwin-Williams and has moved up the ladder, the corporate ladder, if you will, is doing very well for himself. And so I had the negative experience, but in doing the hard thing, it turned out to actually be a good thing for he and myself.
Yeah, that's really cool. Sometimes it's really hard to, like you said, to grapple with those emotions of cutting someone off and feeling like you're letting them down because you're cutting them off. But you got to really stand firm in the idea that you're going to help them more by not enabling them than by continuing to, like you said, help them in a way that's not actually helpful.
Absolutely. I had another family member where I was like, you know what? Where are your credit cards? I was like, you know what? You're in debt. I'll pay off all your credit cards. One condition, you don't get back in debt. And you probably know how that story ends, but I paid off the credit cards, looked up a year, 2 years later, right back in the same situation that they came from. That really, too, I think light bulb goes off and like, you know what? I'm not helping in what I'm doing here. I'm more enabling people to basically be who they are.
Yeah. I mean, and a better way sometimes to help is to say, hey, I got my finances organized. I got this certain amount I can work with, and you should organize yours in a way that you can work with it. And getting the confidence to even say that, it first means that you have to have your stuff organized for real to be able to tell somebody else, like, hey, you having some trouble, you might need to get organized. Maybe I can help you get organized, which I think is a good segue to where you are now and what you're up to. So sports happened, and then what?
Well, sports happened, and then I played 6 years. Honestly, it was one of those where I actually pulled the trigger and made the decision myself to step away. I stepped away with two offers from two different teams to come back and play. But I was at a point in my life where I still love football, but my passion for it was not the same. And I didn't want to just continue to play for the money. I felt like I would have been doing myself and the league a disservice. So I actually left that to go, and while I'm actually living in Mississippi now, to go to Reformed Theological Seminary to get my counseling degree. And so I got my master's degree in marriage and family therapy, where I thought I would be doing counseling, but I decided to put the counseling together with the finance degree and became a financial planner, where I get a chance to still sit down and counsel people, but not on as deep a level as when you're sitting really trying to deal with someone with some psychological counseling issues.
That is amazing to look at finance way back in college and say, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with this, and go play out your career, head one direction toward counseling, and then to be led back towards something else that's kind of back along the same lines of your major and to be doing financial planning. So who do you work with? What kind of clients do you try to attract?
Wow, let me see. Okay, great. What I think is a great story. I had my financial advisor that I mentioned coming out of college, and it turns out some things happened with him where he was not responding to my calls, and things started getting a little weird. I mean, it got to a point where I had called him like 4 or 5 times, and within a week or two span, and never heard back from him. Long story short, I come to find out that he had gotten into some trouble. And nothing with, stealing money or anything, but it was more of an accident where he was at fault. And so he couldn't actually reach out to me. So I ended up switching to another advisor using them. And everything just started to continue to come full circle where I was like, man, I have a degree in finance. I want to learn this stuff. I was going to church here in Mississippi, had a friend who was a financial advisor there. Sat down with him when I was graduating from my marriage and family therapy program and just telling him about athletes and what I saw and guys going broke and wanted to be able to help in that and wondered if he thought I would be a good financial advisor. He said yes. He said I can connect you with some people in the city if I want to work in the field. And he also mentioned that he himself was looking for a partner and that if I wanted to, I could take him up on that offer. And so I did some praying, some searching, decided to go with him. And that was about 3.5 years ago where I officially got in the field. I took the Series 65 exam. I passed that and I became an advisor. So I worked with him before, prior to taking that, and then became an advisor and started slowly take on my own clientele. But my biggest goal was learning. So now I kind of have my own business, yet working for the same financial advisor that I've been working with. And so that's kind of been my journey. And just a quick plug, I just passed my CFP exam in November.
Yes, CFP, the only way to be. That'll be our word of the day. So just stay tuned for that. All right. So talk a little bit about what it means to be a financial planner. Why should somebody pay a financial planner to help them organize their finances? Some of the listeners might be saying, I handle my money. I can barely make it. So why would I pay somebody else a little bit more what I'm barely making it with to help me get organized? Or why pay a planner? What's the value of having a financial planner?
I think the knowledge of what's ultimate knowledge of what's out there. Because here's the thing where even when I took the Series 65, that gave me a great working knowledge of the different avenues and different plans and things that I can use to structure my finances. But doing the CFP really caused me to drill down in knowing how all the different plans and estate planning, insurance, and retirement planning, how all that stuff actually works together. Yes, that's something someone can learn on their own, but unless you're willing to really put in, I would say, on your own about 5 years of continual study, you really won't get to know all the different benefits that are really out there that can be woven together. And so working with the financial planner, I think gives you the advantage in the sense of you have now a sounding board, someone you can call up at your beck and call and say, hey, I heard about this, or I saw that they're talking about Bitcoin or whatever on television. What does that mean? What does it do? How does it affect me? And ultimately, having a plan set up by someone other than yourself, because we all have our own little nuances and our breaking points, but having another eye or another voice or another mind to help say, hey, yeah, I think that's a good idea, or no, I would actually wait on that, I think is the biggest advantage of having a plan.
Yeah, I think those are some really good points. Everybody is going to have to deal with their money in some sort, form, or fashion and organize their finances to the best of their ability. But a financial planner is somebody who spent time becoming an expert in this field and goes above and beyond what's traditionally known out there and is the person that can help you avoid those mistakes. So I think that's really great. So, are you a planner that has a planner then? You talked about money being emotional and trying to have to figure out these different things and having someone to bounce ideas off of. So, as a planner, do you have a planner?
No, now I do not have a planner that I pay directly or that I have set up as a planner, but my partner and I work closely together. So whenever I have something or a decision that I'm thinking about making or doing within my own plan, I consult with him. Like, hey, what do you think about this? Do you like this? Is it a good idea? So I freely use him as I would use someone if I were playing or to have a plan. So now, if I didn't have him, I think I really would consider having a planner of my own.
Yeah, I think it's really important that as a planner who has a planner, because like you said, because I'm a solo practitioner, the idea of really understanding that, like you said, no matter how much financial knowledge you have, that the part about being objective and not being able to see what's ahead, like you say, oh, I want to have this new thing and it works with my budget, so I should have it. But when you're thinking about big picture, does this work in the grand scheme of all your goals and your long term, not just your short term goals? Is always good to have somebody to hold you accountable to those things. And I think money well spent to get that advice and keep you on track instead of making expensive mistakes.
I absolutely agree. And that's why I say, like, am I being cheap? I use him and his advice in that way. But if I was a solo practitioner, I definitely would have to use or talk to someone else or actually have one of my own because I know myself. I know I have my weaknesses and my blind spots.
Amen to that. Let's switch gears for a second and talk a little bit about family. You're married with children. So, can you talk a little bit about how it is managing your finances, discussing finances with your spouse, and how you guys handle that?
Well, I believe in starting early. One thing I hate, like my parents, I learned things through them in a sense of watching them and how they handled it, but they never really sat down and said, okay, here's how this money works. And this is what paying bills and all that looks like. Just as a matter of fact, my 10-year-old, we sat down yesterday and she sat down with me as I entered things into my spreadsheet. We just took a trip to Alabama, just got back. And so I went through, had her pull up our bank account and our credit card that we use that we pay off every month and said, okay, how much is this? Let's add this up. Let's put this in our spreadsheet so we can keep track of how much money we're spending each month. And so we have this app also on our phone. Even my kids now know to look like, hey, how much do we as kids have in our budget? And okay, we're able to get that, or no, we're not able to get that. And so I talk about it now and often. And each one of my, I have 4 kids, by the way. Each one has 3 jars, one for giving, saving, and spending. So each month or each time I give them what I call commission, where they do work and things around the house. And they all have their responsibilities. So at the end of the week, when they're done, I give them their money, they divide it up and put it into their jars. And that's something me and my wife and I both agree on and plan to do from now all the way to our children are no longer living in our house. I went to an insurance meeting Saturday, and my plan from here on out is to take at least one of them with me to one of those meetings or whatever financial meeting that I'm having, because I want them to start learning now and early and often to know how money works, know the money language. So when they're off on their own, they'll know how to manage and set up budgets and know who to at least go talk to figure out what it is they need to know.
Yeah, I think it's amazing to spend that time on the front end so that when your child can look back on their money memories and the behavior and wonder where their good habits came from, they realize that they've been building them from day one. It's so important to start early with creating good money habits, but it's never too late to change them. So, all right. So we're going to finish out with our blitz questions.
That's right.
Quick answers. Keep it moving. You're a defensive player. You know exactly how to do this.
Okay.
First question. You got $20 in your pocket right now. What do you spend it on?
A book.
A book. Everything you need to know is in a book. What is the best thing about being an athlete?
Oh, working out every day.
Exercise.
Yes.
What's the most meaningful gift you received and who did it come from? Why was it meaningful?
Wow. You know what? The most meaningful gift came from my mother-in-law, and she didn't even know that it was a gift when she said that I am no longer who I used to be. And that was a very meaningful gift for me. And I'm trying to keep it short in the sense that it confirmed to me that my life had changed, that Christ had changed my life. And I was no longer who I once was when I first met my fiance or my wife at that time.
Hey. All right. What is your worst money habit?
Ooh. Worst money habit.
Everybody's got one, even a financial planner.
I know I do. And Daggum, you put me on the spot with
all right, best money habit.
I don't even know if it's the best money habit, but over diversification would probably be, I guess, my best money habit, if that's a good habit.
Over diversification.
Yes.
All right. Best advice you've ever received.
Best advice. Oh boy. See, these things. Love your wife as Christ loved the church.
All right. There it is. Something you do for fun that doesn't cost anything.
Play with my kids.
Playing with your children. Yeah. That's awesome. Our final question is, can you share with us one thing that you would like to improve about your finances in the upcoming year?
I would like to improve my cash flow.
What's the action item to help you improve it?
Actually, using one vehicle to fund my living expenses while an investment grows, and that investment is growing more than I'm actually spending out. So by the end of the year, when I convert back, I will have more cash flow from that investment that I'm allowing to grow.
All right. There it is. Well, KJ, thanks so much for being on the show today. Tell everyone where we can find you.
Yeah, you can find me at prowealthinvest.com. That's the website that I have. You can reach me by email, which is kjennings@brandwealth.com, and that's BRANWEALTH.com. kjennings@brandwealth.com or prowealthinvest.com.
Well, thanks so much for being on the show.
All right. Thanks a lot, man.
I hope you enjoyed listening to Kelly's money memoir. He gave us some valuable nuggets today. One thing that hit home for me was the idea that giving money to someone with poor finances is like putting a Band-Aid on something that needs surgery. It isn't going to help them or their finances in the long run. KJ also drilled us about how important a budget was in helping him keep his finances under control. Which brings me to my next point. Some advisors don't belong in the business, like the advisor that told him not to worry about a budget because no one ever sticks to them. I can't say it enough. A real financial advisor is concerned about more than just your investments. An advisor that doesn't have time to help you with the basics and doesn't think a budget is a good use of your time is one you don't want to work with. Your financial literacy is imperative to your success. Our word of the day today, CFP. Kelly shared with us how he recently passed the CFP exam. CFP stands for Certified Financial Planner, and the process to earning these credentials is similar to the requirement to become a doctor or a lawyer. You have to meet rigorous criteria in order to get these marks. You have to pass an exam, have a minimum amount of experience, proper education, and a commitment to ethics. Not everyone providing financial services is a CFP. Just make sure that you understand the credentials of the person that you decide to work with. If you have financial questions, suggestions for guests, or would like to share your money memoir, please contact us through our website, worth-listening.com. Thanks again for tuning in today. We hope you found this episode worth listening to.